All right, welcome back to Chasing Squirrels. I am thrilled to be able to reconnect with my guest on this week's episode, Allison Fuisz. I gotta say that the original conversation was set up for last June, and we kind of, my people and her people just couldn't cut. You're not supposed to start laughing yet. I haven't introduced you yet. My people couldn't get it together with her people. Then there was like a broken shoulder thing, and then summer happened, and then a long silence, and then she reached back out to me recently and said, "Hey, we're gonna do this thing," and I was like, "Okay, yeah, let's roll." So, without too much giggles, Allison, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Good. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. The fact that your podcast is called Chasing Squirrels, which is just exactly what happened. I saw a squirrel idea, just the sidetracked brain of this educator.
Yeah.
And then I realized that in that time frame too, I fell off my bike and had a small concussion. So I never shared that with you. So we've had a couple injuries in between our first original connect where our people clearly did not make it work, but our people came together now.
I will say, two things. I am this podcast is nothing if not meta. And the second part is, I guess, recovery. Every once in a while, chasing squirrels is tough. You need
totally.
some recovery time. You fell off your bike.
That's that was a dog issue, not my dog. It was just wrong place, wrong time, going too fast on a country road. Well, that's a whole other episode. Well, I digress.
See if I can swing that one back in at some point, or at least be able to make some metaphor out of it. So. Yeah. Okay, so throw down an introduction for yourself. Who are you? What you doing?
Well, as you mentioned, I'm Allison Fuisz. Well done with the pronunciation. I'm really happy to be a French immersion educator here in Ottawa at the Ottawa Carleton District School Board. Pretty excited about that. And I definitely can consider myself a lifelong learner. So I'm definitely always seeking out professional development. I took that risk a couple of years ago to do my master's, which definitely challenged me in such a meaningful way and connected me to some awesome individuals, and really has pushed me to really look at education in a different way, not in a really positive way, a positive change attitude kind of thing, and for me as an educator, just to be continually looking at things from different perspectives and critically thinking about things like we try to challenge our students to do. Just note that I am a teacher here in Ontario, but I'm a product of the Nova Scotia education system. Yeah, I know, right? I was a 2-year education program student at Acadia. So before it came into here in Ontario, I knew all about it.
You know what though? I think there's a cold stone cold fact in there that pretty much Ontario was the only place that didn't have a 2-year.
This is true.
Yeah. So, part of it is like you folks were doing it right. Because even thinking back now, so I was a product of the 1 year, and I think about all that stuff that I could have been learning about or practicuming, made that word up, about, because the fact of it is the 1 year. Now, I was fortunate when I came through as a tech teacher. And I will tell you, the courses that they were offering for tech teachers to become teachers were way better than the ones that they were offering core. Core teachers, you basically, from my observational experience, if you were coming in with your English degree, you then had to take an English course. And I thought to myself, why? You've already taken your degree. For example, one of the courses I got to take, it was incredible. It literally was tech classroom management, how to use an overhead. How to use an overhead, how to write on the chalkboard properly, like how to position yourself so that you can write clearly and still interact with your class. And I can remember talking about sitting in the computer lab, typing up a paper, and there were 2 individuals across from me that were like science and math. And they were so frustrated. Like, why do we have to keep doing? They're basically, I get it. The essence of it was teaching them how to teach their courses, like their curriculum specialty. But it, from my point of view across the table, it sounded like it just felt like they were taking more math and more science courses. And I thought to myself, so I came in as a chef. So I had that tech training.
Oh, amazing.
It was really cool. So I thought, being shown how to not reverse your overhead and how kind of left is right and up is down, like all those kind of things that tend to be the embarrassment moment when you're trying to keep your curriculum together, I thought, man, they should have had, that should be for everybody. So that was the one upside. But then all the other stuff that I've since then got interested in, like special education and alternative education, and all those spaces were not representative of my learning. And thinking back, those were all add-ons. So my hope is that in the least having a 2-year for anyone that has that program now, some of those pieces are now integral, as opposed to, oh yeah, by the way, you have to go to this 3-hour seminar at night, and that's the only time you're going to be exposed to it.
Well, and I think I had the opportunity last year to actually take a secondment position at the U Ottawa, and I was teaching a course and getting to talk to the students. They were the first cohort of it. That was such an eye opener too. It was a reminder of what I did over my 2 years, but too that how students are helping to shape how these programs work because of their now more fluid practicum experiences, and having more practicum experiences, seeing what's happening in the classroom, giving that feedback to the courses, or to the programs, which I'm definitely hoping that they take, and seeing like the realities of the classroom versus just the research, like how to combine that to be effective educators, because you can read tons of things from a book, but how are you going to apply that? How are you going to put that into action in the diverse rooms in which we get to learn in with the awesome students? So it's definitely an interesting experience.
Have you had any teacher candidates work with you?
I have not actually. I don't know if it's because it's a French immersion thing, and we're so we're fewer in numbers. But within that same breath, there have been within my school multiple teacher educators in training, or whatever you want to call them, that I definitely speak with, and just I'm curious about what their experience is like, how they're developing the relationships with the students in this short time frame that they're here. What are they learning in their courses? How is it applicable to the space that they're in now? What are we doing that is opposite or in line with it? Like how are we connecting the systems so that there's success rates, retention success rates versus people, dropping out because they're too frustrated, or, jobs may be the issue, but some people, they're overwhelmed or whatever. So I've had conversations with some of those people passing through our doors.
Yeah, me too. I've connected digitally. There's a side hustle that I'm on again, off again with the On Ed mentors.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm loosely affiliated with it now. I was deeper in before, but the whole intent with that was to connect with in-program candidates, pre-service, first or second year, whatever they were in, and sort of help connect with them, but also broaden their practicum, but also their learning network in a not artificial manner. It wasn't just, hey, here's some people to follow. It was, here's someone to talk to, which is a fundamentally different kind of dynamic. It's not just sort of pushing, hey, you got to go meet these people. It was actually handing them a fully fleshed out relationship. And it's like, here you go. Like, you can start with something right now. So I wonder, it's funny. I don't think I've had the opportunity to have, I've worked with teacher candidates before, but they were assigned, there was a group of them that was assigned. It was when I was in special education prior to my current portfolio. And there was 3 of them that were assigned to our department. They were tagged to one teacher, but they were sort of moving in all the spaces. So they got to be in all the grade levels of special education in high school level, but they also got to do a lot of, they got a lot of different experiences, because every teacher that they worked with, they were able to kind of, glean some more stuff. It's funny, when I think about taking on a student teacher myself, there's one part of my brain that says, Clough, you so need to involve yourself with that. There's another part though, I'm a little scared.
Oh,
it's a funny thing. At the same point, I'm like, I get this little bit of anxiety. You know what it comes down to? And it's so ridiculous. But what it comes down to, they're going to look at my stuff. They're going to look at the stuff that I'm developing. And I think to myself, my gosh, Clough, like, isn't that exactly like the conversation that we just kind of cringe at sometimes? Like, don't look at my lessons. Don't look at what I've designed. But there's something in me that's like, oh, but they're gonna see the inner workings of you. They won't.
But you know what? I think that, and I just to respectfully think, like, is your fear factor that they're going to judge it, or that they're going to look at it and be like, this is opposite of what we're being told at the course level, our secondary or our post-secondary learning? Or is it that they're going to take it and make it their own, like, plagiarism type thing? Like, what is it?
Oh, no. I'm like, and that's the thing. I could give it away for free in a second. In a second. It's just a weird malformed voice, reaching forward from first year teacher me. That's all it is. It's
Yeah.
just I just find it remarkable that voice is still there, because I share everything. Like, take it. And my only hope is that message in the bottle comes back to me with something written on it some year from now.
Yeah.
Like, I don't, but it's when that's that sort of like passing in the night kind of a relationship. Now, okay, so side note about Clough, I'm good with relationships. I'm pretty I'm a pretty good relationship guy. I'm reliable, I'm responsible, but there's something about that just makes me think that, like, I get nervous. I get nervous with that deeper bit of accountability. I guess I like being a part of the cluster of supports. It's that specific.
Yeah.
I will say there is something within it, and it's I will not say it's justified, but there is something in it that also makes me nervous about seeing how the faculties are setting up the students, and my sort of wondering about what happens if I see something that really isn't on point. And I am the person that will say, yeah, that's not on point. I know you're a university, but that's not on point with where things kind of are. I can see how that would be talked about at faculty, but that's not really where we're at here. So I also have that little bit too, like how to challenge. Is there any space for me to challenge back with the university curriculum at that point?
Well, and that's where I think that universities creating more secondment opportunities for teachers to leave the classroom and still be in the classroom and come in and work with the tenured professors to look at it from a different perspective and to look at it from the ministry idea. Don't get me wrong, I love research. Like, I'm continually looking at things, and how some people get absorbed in YouTube. I get absorbed in like metadata, not to be like, oh, well, this data is saying all this and I have to do it. Totally opposite. It's just more a curiosity of the time spent and to see, well, what did the kids get out of this, and how is this truly changing the practice of educators to support students, and how is this really being rolled out, or is this just another bandwagon, or what is that expression? Is it bandwagon? I'm horrible with expressions sometimes.
Yeah. Say it in French.
I don't even know if there is one in French, to be honest.
I love those words
in my brain. It's
bandwagons, right? I mean, are you jumping on it? You're jumping on the bandwagon?
Yeah, you jump on the bandwagon, and who's picking up this research, and why are they picking it up, and like, have they looked at their demographics? Like, all these questions go through my head, and it's why my brain doesn't shut down sometimes. But the experience that I had of incorporating student voice, like the class that I taught at the university, they were the end of their second year, their last term, and I showed them my syllabus. I was so proud of myself. Like, I got some feedback from some of my colleagues and some friends and things like that. They're in the education system outside of Ottawa, and they're like, yeah, this looks awesome. Like, it's connected. It makes sense, blah, blah, blah. It's like authentic, whatever. Showed it to them like, well, we did this. So I asked them, I was like, okay, if you've already all done this stuff and you're familiar with these documentations, what do you need? Like, look at the course title, and what can I provide you with to make you feel ready under the headings that I need to follow? Like, here's what I need to do for you. But how can I spin that? And the opportunity that I had to change the syllabus on the first day to reflect the needs of the students was phenomenal. And so knowing that there was support at the university level within that department to do that, under the caveat that I'm still following their guidelines, but supporting these soon to be certified educators, was pretty phenomenal. Doesn't mean we still didn't repeat some stuff through a different perspective, but it was kind of cool to be able to do that and to know that they were open to as such.
I was really fortunate to be brought into, so it's, PLNs from Twitter. I got to say it. Like, I love what I've gained by making these professional relationships. I really do. And one person in particular, Jill Stambolich, invited me in. She was teaching. So she's elementary. She's music's in her heart. That's her training. She's also done a lot of work with the Rotman School, integrative thinking.
Yeah.
So just like out of this world reframing of education kind of stuff. And she was teaching, I think it was the Music 1 AQ or something like that. And she brought me in just for a talk. And I came in and I talked about kind of empathetic universal design, which I think I put some words together and I thought, yeah, that sounds good. I think, and then I built my sort of talk around it. But what it came down to is sort of being mindful, really being mindful of how you integrate your life with curriculum. So how is it that you're building stories? So it's not so much rhetoric; it's more poetic when you're delivering. And there's a space to exist in there. And I brought in podcasting and reflective practice as well. And when I got in that space, I really enjoyed it. I liked coming in as the consultant and sort of playing the part there. But I think I would be I'd be anxious. I'd be stressed out about designing that curriculum. I think I'd be playing it more like, well, how you resulted it. You said, like, what can I bring to you? What can I offer you? Because I have a ton of things, and without imposing experience on you or without imposing the syllabus, if I can work within this kind of like the wiggle room, what is it that you need? And I really enjoyed that because I felt like I was able to come in that and do that like as a session.
Yeah.
And the conversations were cool. They were very cool.
Well, and we need to have honest conversations with the pre-service teachers, and it also allows us to think about our practice and that the voices, it's the many voices that create great opportunities. And that's definitely what this opportunity provided for me. It made me rethink a few things and look at it from a different angle, made me up my game in many other perspectives, but to also not take myself overly seriously with some things either, because at the end of the day, it's about the kids' learning opportunity, and our jobs they're not jobs, they're fun professions to be in if we choose to have that attitude. And that's what I hope everyone leaves the Edge programs feeling. Happy, of course, that they're done, but that they're getting into a really exciting, fun profession if they choose to look at it from that angle.
I would agree that the joy. Joy's good. Joy is very good. I wanted to ask. So here's a big sweeping question. You jump on whatever. Believe me, I'm still looking at the sketch note that I put together. But how about this for a leap off?
Yep.
So we were going to talk in June. So it's now, was that July, August? So what, like 8 months later ish? Tell me about any sort of major shifts, major changes. Like how different are you and I right now 8 months later? Like where we were sort of having that original conversation, I'm looking back through this sketch note. I'm like, okay, I kind of covered your blogs. And then I think I also want to remind you, like, I still love your Twitter profile picture. It has such like joy. And I think there was a story there that you shared. But how different now 8 months later are you? Like thinking about me approaching you 8 months ago to have a conversation, and now there's 8 months more of things to talk about. What pops up from those 8 months that, see, it's a lot. There's a lot. You could grab anything.
Oh, this is such a loaded, like, this is so huge. I'm going to try to minimize it but still be really cognizant of a response that's honest. So in June, I knew that my school was closing. I was in a grade 6, 7, 8 school, and we were one of the ones slated to be shifted to a 7 to 12, while our grade 6s would stay in their locations before they would transfer to us. So the biggest change for me has been adjusting to not just our new location in terms of space, but the learning opportunities, just being in a new building, developing new relationships with colleagues that are in the 9 to 12, trying to co-create a vision to navigate through different perspectives of what education looks like. And how some people are unfamiliar with how elementary works and some people are unfamiliar with secondary. So it's been a navigation of relationships, of using space in a different way, of trying to build the connection from the 7 to 12 student perspective. It's been a time adjustment for me, rebalancing a few things, letting some things go, taking more things on. It's been overwhelming in some ways, and I've definitely felt more tired this year, but I've also felt more positives and like, whoa, this is really cool. Like this is an opportunity for us to really be solution focused and be collaborative. And it's kind of hard to, in all honesty, to put the past 8 months in words, from the preparation of having these meetings to kind of get us set up for this change, to the realities of it, has been a real testament to how people adjust to change. Like it's the process building up for it. You come in, like you can be either really kind of nervous about it or eyes wide open. And I was eyes wide open, being like, yeah, let's do this. This is going to be great. I'm going to miss where we were. Don't get me wrong. And then kind of the reality sits in of like, oh my gosh, the work that needs to go into making this really awesome for the kids. It's more than I think some of us thought at first. But it's really kind of pushing our thinking and pushing the envelope in some positive ways of looking at a 7 to 12 model differently. So maybe I think that answer was longer than I intended it to be.
No, it totally worked, and you've given me lots of little inroads into it. So teachers when they're going into whatever they're going to teach, they're kind of deciding what level they're going to teach at. And so, despite the fact I teach intermediate students, that stops at grade 9. Like I can say I teach intermediate, but I don't have the full experience of what teaching intermediate is, because that's a wider band than just grade 9 and 10 students. So I'm curious about, you have an experiential lens that I would say very few teachers have. Very few educators have that experience of sort of moving across that intermediate line into, as you've said, like a completely brand new frame. So when the change was made and you arrive in September, I'm curious about hey buddy, it's okay. It's okay. It's all good.
He has a toy. There's a dog in this, everybody, just anyone listening knows.
That's my son. That's my son. I gotta feed him. Jacob, go get some raw meat.
Oh my goodness!
It's
this laughter is
to all my listeners. I do not feed my son raw meat. But so here's the question then. So you've moved through this sort of spectrum of intermediacy that many instructors would never have an opportunity to have. So you step in September, and within the first few weeks, you start to have these thoughts, these noticings. What's the thing that you start to notice when you're actually immersed in the change? So you spend all this time developing, approaching, prototyping, guessing, dreaming, and then you arrive. September, school starts. What do you start to notice about being in that space that maybe, I would say you had no way to sort of see it until you were there? Was there anything in particular that that kind of popped up on the front end of that change?
I do believe space would be one of them. The fact that we had ourselves spread out in one spot and then all of us are in the same hallway. So in my mind, I saw it as, oh, this is awesome. Collaboration is going to go through the roof. But our whole schedule changed, and how we rotate through the periods shifted to a far more, the way our students shift. So what I noticed first was just a difference of how I had to approach my teaching because of transitions happening in the hallway. That was something my brain never prepared itself for. And I think I was more distracted than some of the students. It's not that it was like anything crazy, but our classroom learning space is, it's right near a door where everybody comes and goes for their music class or phys ed and things like that. So we work on 20-minute periods. It's 20-minute periods, but they go longer than that. So having to kind of begin to understand the structure of the transitioning to make sure that I'm not applying any like super independent, silent opportunities for learning that a lot of my kids crave, planning them around that so that they can get into their learning zone, so they can have their fluid learning opportunities and not feel a distraction. Planning in more brain breaks, meaningful brain breaks to cut into some of the way the time works. But also another thing that I noticed within the first little bit too were how students were, how to support students in the fact that some of them were still really nervous to be in this huge space, to be transitioning through secondary students, even though we were moving to a school that they would have been moving to in grade 9. As an educator, positioning myself in places to help the kids feel safe. So knowing that being in the hallway, being in certain key locations as a familiar face, was of vital importance to the success of the kiddos, and still in many ways is. So those are two real things that kind of went, I think the latter I definitely kind of presume would be a necessity, but the former kind of, my little brain just never for one second thought about that in the preparation of planning, and then even co-planning once the students got there for their learning success.
Do you strike me as a joyful person. You and
I admit that I sing a lot. I'm not saying I'm good at it, and I dance in the hallway, and I have a portable speaker that definitely rocks out some tunes that the kids look and they're like, "When were you born again?" Doesn't matter.
that joy, that sort of that connectivity, as you said, you're dancing in the hall, you're spending time in obvious spaces and sharing this part of yourself. You strike me as someone that will go there. Am I on point so far?
100%. And I mean, yesterday was the first day of spring, right? So I didn't care that it started at noon. I had my bright yellow pants on and my flower shoes.
Perfect.
That comes out the first day of spring, and they can be pretty. They're larger than life in some ways. So it makes people. It's fun. So it's yeah.
So here's where it brings me. One of the biggest things that I wrote on the page here is how to lose control fearlessly. And I think that there's two spaces I'd like to play here with. One, you've said that some of the students are, they're nervous in this new space that they're in. Like they're recognizing that there's so much more to fill. So maybe it's the same question. What does the staging of that release into the space look like? And I guess for you, when I think about the joy that you're put in the hall, do you feel the relational connection of that is that there's people that really depend on you to sort of rep that way, that you're sort of like, yeah, you know what, if you want to kind of connect, like go down and see Allison. Like, do you find, are people showing up and just like, yeah, I don't know why I'm here, but I'm just going to kind of hang for a bit. So it's a two-parter. How do you stage it for the kids to sort of get to that space that you sound like you demonstrate quite easily? And also, do you have people just kind of showing up? They need that sort of like that moment kind of correction, like go see Allison, like she'll set you straight.
Well, I just want to, I would say I'm pretty positive at school all the time. I will be honest. I've had my moments of being like, okay, what is happening? How can I, like, serious moments? And I definitely come home sometimes super tired. So I just don't want anyone to think that I'm like this. I have my moments. I think everybody has them, but in the school level, I'm going to go to the second one first. One of the things, the people coming to me, one of the things that really shocked me, but it was a really proud moment, but also it's like a time management thing, was secondary students that I taught coming to me and saying, okay, well, we have this project we want to work on. Can we use your class to like survey them? Or we have this club. Do your kids want to be part of it? So I had former students in the high school level coming up to me and asking for advice and support on this transition. And I never thought that. And I'm definitely put myself out there to the secondary staff to be introduced to many of them and say like, hey, like if you're part of this club, can I help you? Uh-oh, my dog just got caught in the speakers. I'm so sorry
No,
to
no
jump
problem.
on my lap with the speakers and rip my earphones. Who needs
Easy.
kids when you have dogs?
What's the dog's name again?
His name is Ruxin, Ruxin, and he's lovely, but he doesn't like it when he's not getting attention at night sometimes, apparently.
Ruxin.
Um, but that so there's been a few teachers that have come to me just because of some backgrounds that they know that I was familiar with. I let people know, and students coming. But in terms of like my own students, they they've kind of looked for safer spaces. Like they've wanted to stay in to work on things. They still know that they need to go outside, but it's been creating safe spaces, fun spaces, knowing that the room it isn't my classroom. It isn't just for the students in there, that it's a learning space for all, that there's board games and things like that, just to make it a familiar place, kind of like Cheers, minus all that stuff that kids, minus all that other thing. I hesitate. I kind of regret almost using that example, but Cheers was a familiar kind place. Like I remember watching that show as a kid and being like, okay, minus that stuff that's in their glasses. It just
The
seems
spirit of Cheers.
the spirit of Cheers, exactly, or the spirit of Friends minus all the drama. That's the kind of places that we want to create for our students, and so that's kind of essential.
I think what's perfect about, like, you start to realize almost any 80s reference is problematic through a teacher lens. Like, no,
yeah.
Friends. No, not Friends. Cheers. No, not Friends. Facts of Life. No, not Facts of Life. I don't like that. It's like you'd start like.
Yeah, I kind of, as soon as I started saying it, like, oh, but it's. I'm not sure if I really answered your question, but it kind of that part never changed. Like that was always a part of what I had at our former school. But it was definitely the shock, the pleasant shock of having people coming upstairs suddenly, not just because they wanted to see what the 7-8 wing looked like, but because they saw students saw these opportunities to collaborate and to try to figure it out, and having these big visions when sometimes we need to scale it back and like go step by step because we have to be respectful of the needs of the 7 to 8s, and trying to navigate like these aren't little kids. These are the grade 8s are going to be grade 9 soon. So yes, as teachers being like, okay, let's still give them their grade 8 opportunities, but they're in their grade 9 school already. How do we navigate that? How does that work? What does that look like? How does that change us as a teacher? Are we changing our practice to model more what it's going to look like in grade 9 because we see it, or we can speak to those teachers? That's a total like down a different road path conversation, but yeah.
One of the reasons that I ask is that, okay, so one of the things that I'm always fascinated by is I've heard at the high school level, X student, you really should work on that, insert whatever skill, whatever challenge.
Yeah.
Because when you get to post-secondary, X is going to happen. And then I've heard a very similar conversation at elementary. Well, yeah, you know what? We do this now in elementary, but when you get to high school, and it's this off-putting to each other stage. And one of the things that I'm mind blown. I think about my own children, and right now in elementary, and I look at their explosive creativity. They're unabashed approach to making and just doing and asking tons of questions, no matter how ridiculous. And I'm pre-mourning the change that happens in that transition between elementary and secondary. So I'm curious if, with having the 7 to 12, and it might take a little bit of time to sort of see this, but I wonder about, are the 7s and 8s in a 7 to 12 more like high school, or are they still hanging on to that magic that I will say happens in elementary and middle school?
I think based off what I'm seeing, I still think that there's, okay, conversations that I've had, especially because I'm a French educator, or, French language, geography, health, history, those are all taught in the French language. Speaking with some of the teachers in that department and sharing some of the multimedia resources that we do, it makes me very feel positive for not. Like, I see a shift occurring. And I mean, it's not necessarily moving at rocket pace, but yeah, I see a very different approach from elementary to secondary, partly because, us in the intermediate elementary, we need to be kind of a jack of all trades sometimes. We don't necessarily get to be placed into our specialty, or we'll teach multiple subjects, including our specialty. So we need to think outside of the box with our students, for our students. We have different preps. Our preps can run on a very different schedule versus the preps that the secondary has. And where I'm going with this is that there is still language being used, I feel, in our spot, because it's still very fresh, that we are aware that what we may be doing now may not be reflective of where students are going, and that in the same breath, the same thing from secondary to post-secondary. But I also have heard through many different spots that is shifting, that the creativity, because the jobs that exist out there don't reflect this like blip in a person's life where creativity and freedom of learning and imagination can't be had. So I think as we hear more in the media with regards to companies searching for critical thinkers, people who are curious first and foremost, creative, that sure, they can follow a structure, but at the same time can pose the why question and, push that company to be better, or push their profession to be better. I think that message is starting to really kick in for a lot of people. But I think that too is representative of how long people have been teaching that same position. So I'm not saying this is true of my school by any means. I don't know some of the educators well enough. It's still again, it feels fresh. But when you stop seeking out professional development on your own, to me, being on Twitter allows me to learn so much on a daily basis without paying for a course. It just makes me think, if we're not seeking out what's actually happening in the world around us, then what does that do for our students? You can look at curriculum goals from a variety of angles and see multiple entry points that allow students to show their learning based on those big expectations, while still, if we can allow students to have multiple entry points to meet those big ideas, sure, it's a bit more work on us, but I say this with a grain of salt in some ways, or with little hesitation, as I do sometimes a lot of things. Aside from my coursework, I've never had to write a paper. When I did my undergraduate degree, I had to write a paper, but I wasn't a teacher first. I worked for a company, and I don't remember ever writing a massive thesis or a paper. I remember writing memos and things like that, and having to be a good writer there. But the applicable skills that I had were that of integrative thinking and design thinking, and being able to question respectfully and to have meaningful critical dialogue with my colleagues. So how are we prepping our students in that way across the system? And we do that in elementary, not everybody, but a lot of people do. Then when I think secondary are starting to see that as students come through, that the teachers have to change, or they're going to see more behavior issues because students are pushing back respectfully. So there's your really twisted, convoluted answer on that.
No, I love it. It totally taps into, I've had other conversations about the benefits of multi-generational schools. Mm-hmm. And this plays a little bit into this. Like it's part of the conversation. Like what would a school look like that allowed retirees to come and take courses with the teenagers? Mm-hmm. Because there's spaces available. And if your school is a community hub, then why would someone have to go to night school? Like, let's be honest, like, why do you really have to do that? And we can talk about law, and we can talk about, making sure that people have security checks and all this kind of stuff, but that's just paperwork and process. That's sort of like, if there's somebody in the community that wants to take their grade 11 English class and there's a space, then all of a sudden you have this kind of really interesting kind of dynamic way to look at a school as a community hub. Mm-hmm. And I think part of that is also, whether we're talking about, we have a K-12 system, but what does that look like when that campus is really close to one another? Why do we specifically have to sort of separate that into two different campuses? So I love the experience that you're getting. I think it's a gold mine of experience to sort of look at, the justification for why we keep kids separated. And there's a whole lot of developmental arguments you could have. There's a whole lot of curriculum arguments, logistics of scheduling, but you're kind of doing it. And I think it's really, really cool.
Well, and it comes down
Really
to
cool.
like the idea that we're local and global citizens. So our students their learning isn't confined to four walls. The learning is something they do every moment of every day. And the learning should never stop just at the classroom. The relationships that we develop within our classrooms to foster that curiosity and learning, we need to let our students recognize that they can learn so much from their community and bring the community in, be it from a local or global perspective. And so it kind of connects to what you're saying is, to me, no matter what the grade, bring in the experts, bring in the people that live in the positions that these students dream to have. One of the things that, this is totally going off the rails a little bit, but for some reason it bothers me when I hear, well, when you're in the real world, our students are in the real world. They're in their reality. Their job is to be a learner, and hopefully for the rest of their lives to be a learner. I mean, that's a utopian approach probably. So we have a real responsibility to get them tapping into their passions, to tapping into what makes them tick. And they may change that multitudes of times. But some experiences that I've had working with the Ministry of Education, which has been probably some of the best, actually, and talking to some students who graduated saying like, yeah, no one really asked me what I wanted to do, or they kind of shunned when I said I wanted to be a hair cutter or a hairdresser. Sorry, that's the correct term. And I really wanted to do this, but I just don't know what to do. Like, how do I get to that point? If we start to listen to our students and listen to what their needs are, delve into their strengths versus like thinking about their weaknesses and seeing it as this is your area of growth based off the strengths that you have. Who knows what our students could do, and who knows where that could take their learning and how that can kind of shift the system.
I love that you drew in the global goals, because the global lens, it right away draws in and pushes out that lens to look at what does that connectivity look like when you're no longer 100% dependent on learning in the space that you're in. And it's a very different, I think it kind of goes back to our discussion around working with student candidates and expanding their PLN at the same time that they're going in for their practicum, and to be able to have conversations about their practicum experience with their practicum teacher, whoever's supervising them. But then on their lunch break, they could then reach out digitally and say, I'm curious about this thing that I saw in class about, using Google Docs. And then they could come back period 3 after lunch, having taken a little mini AQ, and they could actually come back corrected and educated. And especially if they're eager and curious. And I like that. I like that sort of like existing and activating locally, but learning globally kind of elasticity. And one of the things that's kind of, I know, I have student voice and multiliteracies written down on the sketch note here, but I think there's a really sweet extension out of what you're talking about to then wrapping it around what I see popping up frequently on your feed about sustainable sort of global goals.
Yeah.
And I think that, a couple of years ago, there would have been a harder, like I hear students now in grade 9 and 10 talking about their PLN. And when I think their PLN, I don't necessarily think they're talking about their study group. They're talking about the individuals that they connect with outside of their class, outside of their school. So I can you speak a little bit to why, like you impassioned, you're sort of energized, this is something that I think is in your teacher's soul, is making sure that education opportunities are connected with this big picture. And I'm just curious as how was that brought to you in the first place? How is that idea of sort of connecting those global goals brought to you in a way that you're like, yo, I'm in, like, this is something that like soak me with it, because I'm going to bring it. How was it brought to you the first time, that idea of using the global goals as teaching tool, or just like the vehicle to learning?
To be honest, it was even prior to, so, in 2000, there were the Millennium Goals, but prior to that, so I'm a first generation Canadian. My father was very adamant in many ways about making sure that I was aware of what was going on in the world around me and that I had a responsibility to be an active citizen. So from a young age, it was something ingrained in me. And sure, at some points it was kind of like, this is not how you're going to think, but this is what you need to think about, and you decide how to think about it. So the Sustainable Development Goals came to my attention when I just kind of was browsing through the UN websites, and like it was already out for a couple months. I went, oh my gosh, how did I space out on this? And then on Twitter, of course, you start to see things, you start to dig in deep, and then you connect with the right people because of your social media PLN, and bada boom, bada bing. It was kind of the best. It kind of encompassed how I grew up, but I want to note that I've been very mindful too that though this is a passion for me, and I see this as being something that students can find their passion within these goals, see the connection, understand that they're local and global citizens, what that looks like, the empathy point of view, or the empathy piece, that I can't push my agenda though, or I can't push this agenda on students. They have to buy into it. I'm at, teaching intermediate students, that gray matter of their brain, they're deciding a lot of things at this time frame. I don't want to push them against being awesome for the local and global, that it's throwing things at them can only go so far. So how I integrate it, yeah, sure, there's a push at the beginning, but then it's a slow kind of, everything that we do is connected to the Sustainable Development Goals. And I hear them saying like, oh yeah, this is kind of like, this is connected to health, and this is connected to, like, this is cool to see this health thing happening in Nigeria, and we have it here too, but they're doing it better over in Sierra Leone or something like that. And without them realizing that they're integrating Sustainable Development Goals, but they're having the global mindset. So whether they're looking at the Sustainable Development Goals as being goals to achieve, they're developing a global sense. And that to me is a dream, because if they have a global sense, then that means they may act on it. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but they're making themselves aware at a local and global level.
I had kind of a cool conversation, unrelated topic to what we're talking about right now, but it was talking about, it was centered on the idea of the teacher kind of stepping out of the way of the actual content and not making the moment about themselves. Pretty much what you're saying right now. We present it in a way that the framing makes it accessible. The actual idea needs to be still the same size, but just better access points to it. I think as teachers, many times we have these ideas that pop up on the weekend, or you're cooking something, or you read something in the news, and you kind of go, you write on a Post-it note, oh yeah, like I gotta bring this to the whatever course on Monday. Like it's a good starter or an icebreaker. And the conversation that I was having with another educator was around conversations happening in classroom, whether or not conversations really do need to lead to action. We talked briefly about Jen Apgar, and she posted something from a ministry document. I'll never forget this. It was maybe back in October, November. And one of the quotes within it there was a little bit of a chastisement in there, in that there's a whole lot of really great conversations that happen in education, but not nearly enough action resulting from it. And I've given a lot of thought to that, because I think it really does speak to that space sometimes where the impassioned educator needs to step back and kind of let the students take it from there. And so where we left the conversation with this other colleague, we talked about the connection between pedagogy and protest, and what that looks like when you obviously are the one and you're holding yourself back because it's like, oh, but we could do this and this thing is happening. Is that a challenge for you at all in sort of looking at, that a little bit of that that space, like how far to step in, how to step back. I said to the person I was talking to, I said, I would love to talk with the educator, just like, you know what? I don't care. I step in, I go, I run, I push, I go for it. Like they kind of go, I'm all in. I'm going to bring it 100% of the time at 1000%. I don't know if that's me. I don't know if that's me. I tend to I will be a little bit more detached, especially if I feel like my agenda is the thing that's entirely driving the conversation, or the things that I feel I should, things that bug me, or things that I feel I should be paying attention to as a citizen. Is that space at all challenging for you? Do you see that space as sort of delicately as I'm framing it?
I am this year, and it's definitely, I would be lying if I said it wasn't a challenge, just because I feel so socially charged in that sense. Excuse me, in my throat. That it's kind of been part of my upbringing, and it's something that I'm super passionate about. I work with educators and students from around the world that are passionate about it too, through Google Hangouts, Twitter, and all this other stuff. I would be a hypocrite in many ways if I didn't allow, that's not even the right word. Learning as educators, where, this has been used before by many, like we are the conductors of learning. We can open doors for students and allow students then to open doors for themselves. So sure, there's some things that we kind of just need to push on them. But I don't, the idea of reflecting in the moment and letting yourself lose some of the lead control, because learning for many ages, it should be led by students. Sorry, it's hard for me to articulate this, but it has been difficult. But I've letting go of what I foresee as being essential to their learning, and making sure that presenting the idea and then saying, well, what are we going to do with this? How are you going to learn with this? Let's look at the curriculum document together. This is what we could do with it, but what is your interests, and how can we run with a social justice lens, or how can we run with your coding ideas, and like just allowing the freedom of the students to advocate for themselves, and to not look at it from like, oh my gosh, they don't like me as an educator. No, it's not about that. It's about guiding, being there as a resource, being there as a questioner of their learning, and supporting them however we can, and not ever taking it personally when they're like, that's not that cool. Or I showed an OK Go video the other day, and I was watching my students as it went by. And OK Go creates these awesome, really spectacular videos. So one moment, we looked at it, and we've been looking at all of them, but they just, they created that website with Sandbox to show kind of the learning and stuff like that. So we went back to it so they could see the videos of how it was made. And a couple kids the first reaction that one kid gave was, well, it's such a waste of resources. And here I'm thinking of it like, this is just so creative. Look at the imagination to this part. Like, look what you could do. And it's a waste of resources. And so part of my brain is like, this is how you're going to look at it. And the other part of my brain was like, wait a second, they're seeing it from a global goals perspective. I would never have thought about it in that way. Learning happens all the time in these kids' brains and how they're going to perceive things. So we have to learn to let go. We have to learn to be okay with things getting messy. We have to learn that what we throw at them probably isn't always going to be taken the right way, but what are we going to reflect in the moment? We do so much. We spoke of this in June. We learn so much in our edu programs to be reflective of, but Dr. Crocker, who is someone that she was one of my edu leads when I was doing my master's program, who I have so much respect for. She really made me think about reflecting in the moment, which is something I've consistently done, because I goof up all the time in the class. And I'd say, okay, you caught me. I made a mistake. Let's look it up. Let's figure this out together. So being able to just step aside for a second, let the kids support the learning. You're not being lazy when you do that. You're actually creating more work for yourself in the end, which isn't a bad thing. Yeah, just not working yourself up all the time about throwing things that are so what you think is the right thing, and letting the kids sometimes just sort it out on their own, and letting them drive the learning through multiple choices. I think it's a good thing. I think it's a healthy thing, and it's what their reality is now, because they have so many choices when they leave the classroom of what they're going to do when they on their way home. So choice is a good thing, and mistakes are a good thing.
I like that. I like that kids relensing. It's a waste of resources. That's cool. I like.
I
Yeah,
laughed.
I
It
like
was
that.
awesome.
How's the dog doing?
He's doing a little pacing. I think I don't think it's any more to do with
I can, can I
wanting attention. I think
I
it's
got one
to
more
the
question. I
dog.
got one more question for you. One more one
Okay, awesome.
as we fade into the last few minutes of the hour. So with 3 months, okay, 3 months you got left in this year one of the change. I'm curious. I'm curious if you've got your groove, or if you're hitting your groove, and if you're starting to think about that. Okay, I can kind of get this other thing rolling now. I can kind of get the 2.0, the starting to map out for the next change, or the next kind of project, or the next, I don't know. I guess I don't want to call it initiative because it sounds way too schooly. But when you sort of made the plans over the summer to make the transition into the school, then you have another shift when you make it into the school, and then you start managing that school time. And it's right around this time that plans are starting to be made for the next school year. And you may or may not be in that space, but I'm curious as to, if you're not in that space making specific plans for 2018,
Oh, that's
2019.
scary.
I know. Do a little stretch on that one, eh? Ugh. Go do a 2 minute run that you say you like to do.
Yeah, I
I'll
need to sprint
wait.
right now. Let me sprint. No.
Just do a sprint on the
Yeah.
spot. Do it. Yeah. Ready? He's a maniac. Maniac. Okay. But seriously, like, are you mapping anything out? Have you found the resources, a little bit of the brain space, the head space to say, okay, I think I've got this. I'm in the groove. Here's what I'd kind of like to introduce. Here's what I want to seed. Here's what I want to build moving forward.
Okay, there's a bunch of different ways that I can spin this, but first of all, when this time of the year hits, I'm like, oh my gosh, I only have this much time left, and there's so many things that we have finally gotten our groove sorted on that there's just not enough time. I am one of
Mm-hmm.
those educators that actually fears the end of the year because it's just not enough time. It's not about hitting all the goal, like the curriculum expectations. It's about all of these awesome opportunities that the kids are starting to see for themselves, and it's like they're really getting their voices back, or because they were gone for a bit, they come back, they go, so it's really about, I'm still really zoned in on this year. So the groove is definitely there, but the panic of like, oh my gosh. But I definitely am not, until I know what I'm teaching the next year, I don't think that far ahead in terms of a classroom.
Mm-hmm.
I always in the back of my mind, I'm thinking of, opportunities for the community to be brought in, or the kids to go to the community, no matter what the grade. But for me, I am, in terms of how the school looks at our school does some 7 to 12 clubs, which is kind of different, and some of the planning that we do with our secondary colleagues, where we shared spaces. I'm looking at that, and I'm looking at, well, what has worked this year, what hasn't, where is student voice being incorporated, what is the perspective of the secondary colleagues, because we're still, we are still one unit, but we're still separate in some ways, and in some ways we need to be separate, in other ways we need to be integrative. Those are the kind of things that I am looking ahead to. And ultimately it comes down to administration making decisions, but also like listening to where we are at and where we think we should be going, incorporating student voice in the process wherever possible. So yeah, I'm there for that, by all means, but I'm also just in that, oh my gosh, so much to do, so little time, as always.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. Yeah, I transition, and funny, I think I transition well because of that. Sort of being more aware of running out of time, as opposed to holding a line of when I feel like I have to you know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
sort of, it's slightly different mindsets. I don't mind being chased by the clock. I mean, to be honest, that was my whole life before I started teaching, working in hospitality. We're always being run down by the clock. And to be honest, we're quite successful. I was successful because of it, because I felt like I was, maximizing. You're trying to just soak it and get it all in. So I have a full appreciation of that energy, and I dig it. I think I'm of the same mind.
As much as I am a planner in some ways, and I think long term and big picture, I also know that, again, going back to the reflecting in a moment thing, that sometimes you gotta roll with the punches, and you gotta go down to that last second to get something completed, or shift that morning because something isn't working in the direction that you wanted it to go. So yeah, I'm sometimes I admit that pressure sometimes is better for me. Although I know it's technically probably not better for me. It's double-edged sword.
So here's the space where you got any shout outs you want to do?
Oh, we get to do shout outs?
If you want to do a shout out, do a shout out. It's sometimes people like they throw a little, someone was a mentor, an in your face moment, you can do whatever. I'm thinking like shout outs, and just after that, let people know where they can reach out to you if they want to chase you for more conversation and connect off podcast, but online somewhere else if you want. So any shout outs, any mentors out there that you're like,
oh yeah, well, sorry, this totally reminds me of like the hot ones at the end where the stars, like I don't know if you know the show where they eat wings. It's on YouTube. It's my one YouTube thing that I watch, and they can at the very end do shout out of like, whatever. Anyway, Doc, I already mentioned Wendy Crocker. She truly has shifted a lot of, she would never say that she was the one that shifted, but she made me think. And Dr. Briscoe at U Ottawa, who gave me the chance to actually push my thinking at the secondary or at the post-secondary level as a quote unquote professor. Mr. Jana for actually pushing me to do these podcasts. I hesitated and your shout out to you because you the comfort level that you create for this. But there's so many educators out there. Adam McKinn is one of them. Like I'm kind of running over my words because there's just so many inspirational people that have helped and inspire me on the daily, and my students too. Like it sounds so cliche, but students inspire me every single day with the silly things that they say and the awesome things that they do.
Thank you for throwing me into the mix there. I appreciate that. So if someone was to reach out, connect with you, where would you like to be found?
I would say that Twitter is probably the best way. I admit that sometimes I'm slower. So at Allison_Fuisz, Fuisz. I just wanted to spell that because it kind of sounds fun to spell. Is definitely probably the quickest way to reach out to me. And then from there, I would, either Google Hangout or email or something like that. But a DM or a follow on Twitter is definitely the quickest way to connect, and definitely enjoy collaborating with educators because the world's a better place when we work together.
That's a good wrap. That's a good wrap. I wish I had a good like guitar riff I could throw in at the end there. That's solid. Thanks for spending time with me. I'm thrilled that, it only took 8 months. It was a long engagement. I think it worked out okay.
Hey, you know what? And as I mentioned, thanks for the patience and for the opportunity. It's fun to chat. It really is. And it was, despite some of my stutters, it's because you make me think, and it's a reflecting moment to do these kind of things, which is reflecting in the moment is important, but there's still value in reflecting on moments and to make you think and push ourselves as educators.
And nothing better than the dog ripping your headphones off your face to make you reflect in the moment. Like I'm reflecting in the moment. I should have put the cord up a little higher, just a little higher.
Speaking of which, yeah.
there's the power of reflect. And now you look down, you see that in his sleep, he's been chewing on the other cord there. So you're like, oh, come on, buddy. Stop.
Oh, those
okay, I'll take
dang golden doodles, I tell you.
I hear the minds of their own.
Exactly.
All right, Allison, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, and I look forward to chatting with you online and all the other awesome mediums that are created in this virtual world.
Absolutely. We'll chat soon. Take care.
Sounds good. Have an awesome night and a great rest of your week.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to Chasing Squirrels podcast. You can find other episodes on iTunes and on Podbean. You ever want to connect with me? You can reach me on Twitter @ChrisJClough, or you can reach out to me, chrisjclough@gmail.com.